Welcome to World Revolution Channel. Today we present a summary of the book Why We Want You to Be Rich by Donald J. Trump and Robert T. Kiyosaki. Donald Trump and Robert Kiyosaki reveal the alarming shrinkage of the middle class and how it's threatening global stability, urging readers to escape poverty through essential financial education. They offer practical strategies like becoming active investors who focus on winning rather than saving, expanding your means instead of living below them. Learn to think big, take control of your finances, and turn risks into predictable wealth-building opportunities. This book equips you with real-life lessons from their successes to build lasting riches and secure your future. Let's find out more.
That is a powerful call to action, isn't it? It really sets the stage immediately for what we're diving into today.
It really does. This whole deep dive is about unpacking this unusual collaboration between two huge personalities, Donald Trump and Robert Kiyosaki.
Right. You have the massive real estate developer and the financial educator and author. They've joined forces to deliver one single, really urgent message.
Which is that the old roadmap, the traditional way to financial security, it's just broken.
It's fundamentally broken. And they argue that escaping what they call the middle-class trap requires a complete overhaul of how you think about money and financial education.
That's the mission, isn't it? It's not just a book of tips on how to get rich. They're positioning it as a survival manual for a global economy that's changing at an incredible speed.
Yeah, and threatening the stability of, the average person.
Yeah.
You've got these two very different, very successful entrepreneurs telling you, the listener, that if you keep following that conventional wisdom, you're going to fail.
And what's so fascinating is how they see themselves. They don't just see themselves as businessmen.
No, they see themselves as teachers. That's key. Kiyosaki is the storyteller, right? He uses dialogue, these personal anecdotes, to make complex ideas feel relatable.
And Trump is the complete opposite. He's direct, he's forceful, very focused on the bottom line, on actionable results.
Exactly. And the combination is very deliberate. They're trying to share their knowledge, their whole operating system, because they believe just handing out money doesn't solve poverty.
Right. You have to teach people how money actually works.
Precisely. That's the only real solution in their eyes.
Which sets up the core conflict of the book right from page 1. They're writing this for people who have done everything they were told to do.
The standard playbook. Go to school, get a good job, work hard, save your money.
Live below your means, invest for the long term in a diversified portfolio of mutual funds, all of that.
And they just come out and say it. That advice is obsolete. It's not just outdated, it's actively harmful in today's world.
They completely reject it. They argue that advice is designed for the middle class, which prioritizes safety and security above all else.
Right. These are the people they call passive investors. You invest not to lose. That's the whole philosophy.
Whereas the rich, they're active investors. They play by a completely different set of rules. Their goal is maximum expansion. They invest
to win. It's a fundamental shift, and it requires you to question pretty much every piece of financial advice you've ever been given.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start with the crisis they describe in part 1, because they paint a really, really stark picture of the global economy.
They do. They argue that the middle class isn't just struggling, it's actively disappearing.
And they see America, specifically, becoming a two-class society. It's either rich or poor.
Yes, and they say the middle class, which has always been the backbone of economic and political stability, is shrinking. The language they use is incredibly cogent.
What was it? Slowly sure?
And catastrophically. The analogy they use is just chilling. They say the middle class is disappearing like the polar ice caps.
Wow. And they stress that this isn't just an American problem. This is a global issue.
It is. It's a structural global problem. And it's especially bad in the G8 nations, the wealthiest, most stable democracies. So you're talking about England, France, Germany, Japan.
And to back this up, they bring in some heavy hitters. They quote the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan,
who flatly stated that this trend, this shrinking middle class, is unacceptable in a capitalist democratic society.
When the head of the Fed is saying that, it's not just a couple of entrepreneurs sounding the alarm. It underscores their point that the system is fundamentally flawed for the average person.
It does. And then they draw this really interesting contrast with emerging economies like China and India,
where the middle class is actually growing.
It is. And that's a crucial distinction because it shows how complex this global shift is. But they're very quick to point out that even though the middle class is growing there,
their standard of living isn't necessarily that great.
Exactly. They say it's often no better than many poor people in America. So the point isn't that the problem is solved. It's just that the insecurity has shifted geographically. The system still isn't built for long-term stability for most people.
And that instability leads them right into their framework of the 3 levels of financial advice. You're essentially playing a different game depending on which class you're in.
That's it. Precisely. They break it down. First, you have the poor. Their advice is all about dependency.
The government will take care of you. Social Security, Medicare.
Right. And this is where they say that entitlement mentality becomes a huge barrier to financial independence.
Okay, then the second level.
The middle class.
Reh.
These are the passive investors we just talked about. Work hard, save, live below your means, diversify in mutual funds. Their whole philosophy is about security, about investing not to lose.
And the third level, the rich.
The rich. The active investors. This is the whole focus of the book. These people operate with a philosophy of expansion. They work and invest to win, and they're always seeking control and leverage.
And their first major attack on that middle-class playbook, it goes right for the cornerstone of passive investing, mutual funds.
Yep. And this connects directly to their demand for transparency.
Which is non-negotiable for them.
Absolutely. They define it in 3 ways. It has to be free from deceit. You have to be able to see right through it. And it has to be readily understood. And they argue mutual funds fail on all 3 of those counts.
So what's at the specific problem? How are mutual funds not transparent?
It's all about the hidden costs. The regulations don't require mutual fund companies to disclose their true expenses.
So you see an expense ratio on the prospectus, but that's not the whole story.
Not even close. A professional investor knows there are layers of other costs, trading fees, soft dollar costs, all these operational expenses that just eat away at your returns over decades.
And the passive investor, the one who's told to just buy and hold, has no idea this is happening.
None. They can't see the true costs, so they stay complacent. Trump and Kiyosaki, as active investors, say they would never, ever invest in something where they can't see every single expense and control the asset underneath.
So their advice to you, the listener, is to reject any investment where you're just passively trusting some opaque institution.
Yes, and it's part of their larger point that the entire industrial age model of finance is obsolete. The advice to just save money is, in their words, obsolete.
And they point to a specific historical moment when everything changed. 1974, the passage of ERISA.
The Employee Retirement Income Security Act. That law was a massive, massive pivot for the average worker.
Why was it so pivotal? What did it change?
Before ERISA, most retirement plans were defined benefit plans. The company promised you a specific guaranteed payout when you retired.
Meaning the company took on all the risks.
All the investment risk and the long-term liability. ERISA paved the way for the 401k and other defined contribution plans, and that shift meant the risk and the responsibility moved entirely from the company over to the employee.
So overnight, millions of workers became accidental and often completely untrained financial risk managers.
Exactly. And then you layer on top of that the shift to the information age in 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the rise of the internet.
So you're now an accidental risk manager on a brand new, highly volatile battlefield.
A battlefield where your old industrial age experience might be obsolete. Suddenly you have young tech entrepreneurs getting rich while older, experienced workers are facing pink slips. Their years of service, which used to guarantee a pension, now meant nothing.
And then China joins the World Trade Organization in 2001. That just poured gasoline on the fire.
It massively accelerated globalization. America and a lot of the G8 nations went from being production economies to being consumer nations.
We started exporting jobs and factories.
And when you combine that with this shift in retirement risk, you have the perfect storm. The whole foundation of the middle-class dream job security and a guaranteed retirement was just hollowed out.
Which leads right into the looming financial storm they describe. This isn't just about individual mistakes. It's about massive structural deficits.
Right. They detail these huge financial problems that started in the U.S. but became global concerns because of the scale of the American economy.
They use the U.S. trade deficit as an example.
A terrifying one. At the time they wrote the book, the U.S. was consuming something like $423 billion more than it was producing every year.
That's just not sustainable. It's like a family spending way more than it earns month after month just living on credit cards.
And then there's the national debt. The figures they present are just mind-boggling. They said the U.S. national debt was larger than the combined value of all the stocks and bonds in the entire world.
The clear message being, we can't pay this back.
You can't. And when a country has a debt that's impossible to pay down through taxes or growth, there are really only two options. One is default, which is unthinkable.
And the other is?
Printing more money. And this is what they predict.
This is where they bring in that dire warning about hyperinflation.
Yes. And they use that incredibly sobering historical analogy. 1930s Germany. The Weimar Republic printed massive amounts of currency, and it destroyed the value of the mark.
Savings were wiped out completely.
Gone. Middle-class families who had saved their whole lives were ruined. And they make the direct point that this financial devastation created the instability that allowed extremist political movements, including Hitler's, to rise to power.
It's a very dark, very powerful warning about what happens when you devalue your currency.
It is. So for them, the inadequate 401k and the risk of losing your pension, those are just symptoms of this massive structural debt. Relying on saving paper money puts you directly in the path of this coming storm.
So what's their solution? This brings us to Chapter 4. It's not about donating money.
No, the true solution to poverty, in their view, is financial education. They say they donate their time and profits to financial literacy groups because just giving money doesn't solve the underlying problem of ignorance.
If you don't know how to handle money, more of it won't help you.
It'll just be lost.
Yeah.
This leads to their central rule for creating wealth. If you want to make yourself rich, solve problems.
So problems aren't obstacles, they're opportunities.
They're the biggest opportunities. The baby boom generation is facing huge new problems, jobs being exported, pensions disappearing. Companies solve their problem by shifting the liability to the worker,
Which creates a new problem for the worker.
which an entrepreneur can then solve for a fee, creating immense wealth in the process.
Kiyosaki shares a great personal story about this from the 1974 oil shock.
He does. He'd just started as a Xerox salesman, and the economy was contracting. People were canceling copier contracts. It was a brutal environment.
He was actually losing money because Xerox would charge back his commissions on canceled deals.
He was starving, about to get fired. But his rich dad told him not to look at the failing economy, but to look at the sector that was winning.
Which was oil.
Exactly. Oil prices were through the roof. So Kiyosaki got a part-time job selling oil and gas tax shelters to the rich.
These were investments that offered huge tax write-offs because of the high oil prices.
Right. A 4-to-1 write-off in some cases. So while high oil prices were a crisis for the average person, for the rich, they were a massive opportunity to legally reduce their tax burden and increase their wealth.
And that experience completely changed his financial IQ.
It showed him there were two different worlds. The world of the employee, just trying to hang on, and the world of the active investor, who uses complex tax codes to turn a problem into protected wealth. And that knowledge immediately separated him from the herd.
That idea of breaking away from the herd is exactly where Trump picks up in Chapter 5. He talks about the danger of groupthink and what he calls an epidemic entitlement mentality.
Yeah, Trump's goal, as he puts it, is to break up the herd before people just become incapable of thinking for themselves. Groupthink is what makes people blindly trust financial advisors who are just salespeople.
Or trust political promises that are mathematically impossible.
Right. He argues that true leaders replace that fear with discernment, and that allows them to predict the inevitable. If you can see the consequences of massive debt coming, you can prepare instead of just panicking.
And that takes creative problem solving. He tells that story about Object Orange in Detroit.
Such a great example. You have all these abandoned, run-down buildings causing urban blight. The government is moving slowly, if at all.
So a group of artists just takes matters into their own hands.
They go out overnight and paint these buildings a bright, shocking orange. They identified the problem, the blight, the lack of attention, and used a creative, immediate solution that forced the issue into the public eye.
And Trump applies that same kind of thinking to his own projects, like building Trump Tower. He talks about the massive challenges like getting air rights and zoning variances.
And for anyone listening who might not know, air rights are basically the legal right to use the airspace above an existing building.
In a place like Manhattan, that's incredibly complex and expensive.
Immensely. And a zoning variance is a government-granted exception to the standard building codes. So instead of seeing these regulations as roadblocks,
He saw them as complex puzzles to be solved.
exactly, he viewed every obstacle as a detailed challenge that he actually enjoyed working through. And that ability to see a path through the bureaucracy is what separates the active investor from the passive one.
That distinction moves us perfectly into Part 2, which is all about the mindset of these investors. It's about winning, control, and creativity. And the first rule is that they invest to win.
And that is such a massive philosophical divide between the middle class and the rich. The middle class lives by contracting their means.
Coupons, saving the money from your daily cappuccino.
Right? Sacrificing your lifestyle today for some uncertain future. Trump and Kiyosaki just reject that completely. They like being rich. They play hard. Their goal is always expansion.
And they argue that playing it safe, that passive investing, is actually the riskiest choice you can make.
It is, because you have no security and no control. Trump has that quote, "If your reality begins with your dreams will become your reality." You have to aim high. If you just aim for survival, that's all you'll get.
They also talk about being stubborn, about persistence. The story about the failed soda product comes to mind.
Yeah, the inventor who had a good idea but gave up. He launched 3UP, it failed. 5UP, it failed. 6UP, it failed. He gives up.
And years later, someone else launches 7UP with the same concept, and it's a huge success.
The lesson isn't that the idea was bad, it's that the sheer refusal to quit is often what makes the difference between winning and losing.
To really understand how they do this, we have to look at Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, E, S, B, and I.
The quadrant is essential. It visualizes the different battles people choose based on their core values. E is for employee who seeks security.
S is for self-employed or specialists. They want independence.
B is for big business, over 500 employees. They want leverage and systems. And I is for investor who seeks financial freedom.
And the tax laws, which is where the real game is played, treats each of these quadrants very, very differently.
Drastically differently. The E quadrant, the employee, generally pays the highest percentage in taxes. It's taken out before they even see their paycheck.
And they have the fewest deductions available.
Whereas the B and I quadrants get the best tax breaks. And this isn't an accident. It's government policy. It's designed to favor job creators and people who invest capital back into the economy.
So it's not just about earning money. It's about choosing to play on a field where the rules are written in your favor.
That is the central lesson. They point out that real estate and oil often get special tax breaks because every country needs housing and energy. If you operate in the B or I quadrant, you can align your income with these incentives.
And that lack of control is exactly what Chapter 10 is about. People in the E and S quadrants feel so insecure because their jobs are unstable and their investment savings, stocks, mutual funds are things they have no physical control over.
Right. Kiyosaki says investing feels risky to most people for 3 reasons. 1, they have no financial education. 2, their investments have no control. And 3, they're taking advice from salespeople who also have no control.
The antidote is to take control.
And control for them is internal. Trump calls brain power the ultimate leverage. He says, "Call me a control freak, but I don't accept excuses. Winners take control by accepting responsibility."
If an investment goes bad, the active investor learns from it. The passive investor just blames the market.
Exactly. And Kiyosaki's own path to control involved that deliberate 4-year detour into sales at Xerox.
Why sales?
Because his rich dad told him that if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to know how to sell. He even says he's a best-selling author, not necessarily the best-writing one, because he spent those 4 years mastering communication and persuasion.
That's a calculated, active choice to acquire leverage. It's an investment and a skill.
Which ties right into Chapter 9, where they talk about investing your time. Lost money can be regained, but lost time is gone forever.
They use that quote from Plutarch. Time is the wisest of all counselors.
Yeah, and they have that thought experiment. If wasting 15 minutes meant you lost $500 in cash, would you be more careful with your time?
I think we all would be.
Of course. So they challenge you, the listener, to find 4 to 10 hours every week just for financial education. That's an active investment in your own brain power.
And that active engagement opens the door to creativity, which they cover in Chapter 11. They criticize the school system for focusing on the left brain logic, rules, sequence.
Which is perfect for the E and S quadrants. But the B and I quadrants, real estate and business, that's where the right brain, the creative thinker, thrives.
The more creative you are, the richer you can become.
Because creativity in the B and I quadrants gives you control. You can creatively determine your income and taxes. You can change the zoning on a piece of land to massively increase its value.
That zoning example is so powerful. 10 acres of farmland might be worth $10,000. But if you can creatively negotiate to get it zoned for commercial use, it could suddenly be worth $1 million.
You're turning information and negotiation into capital. Trump's examples are always so tangible. The 80-foot waterfall in the Trump Tower lobby.
Instead of just putting up some old paintings.
Right. He created something dramatic, something original that defined the space and created value that was far greater than its $2 million cost.
And converting Mar-a-Lago from a huge, expensive private home into a successful club.
It's the same principle. He didn't just maintain it. He used creativity and control to turn it into a revenue-generating, tax-advantaged business. Creativity and control go hand in hand.
Which leads right into the need to think big and think expansion.
It's about having a visionary status. You see what is, but you envision how it could be radically better. Trump combining a hotel and condos in the same building was an innovation that maximized the financial yield of that space.
And the smaller chairs story is maybe the best example of this kind of thinking.
It's a brilliant story. His management team says their ballroom is too small for big events. The conventional solution is to spend millions on construction to expand it.
But Trump just stands in the room and sees something different.
He sees that the chairs are huge and plush, taking up way too much space. His immediate vision is, we don't need construction, we need new chairs.
So they replace them with smaller, elegant chairs and instantly increase the seating capacity from under 300 to over 440.
And they saved millions in construction, eliminated all that downtime, and increased their revenue immediately. It is the ultimate example of financial creativity.
They even made money on the deal, selling the old chairs for more than the new ones cost.
It just shows that getting rich can be predictable if you're willing to change your perspective. They quote Abraham Lincoln. I don't think much of a man who is not wiser today than he was yesterday.
The biggest risk is not moving forward with what you've learned.
It's not trying and failing. It's staying stuck, which is Einstein's definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
If you want a different result, riches instead of insecurity, you have to change your thoughts and your actions.
And that internal shift is what part 3 is all about. The defining moments that create that winner's mindset. It starts with the role models, their fathers.
Trump's father, Fred, was this incredibly driven man. He had this intense work ethic.
Yeah, Trump tells that story about his father walking around construction sites, literally picking up stray nails so they wouldn't be wasted. Trump felt he had to exceed his father's success because he had more advantages.
Kiyosaki's lessons were more emotional, coming from his mother and his wife, Kim. His mother, a nurse who died young, taught him the value of life.
And he shares that incredibly profound story from his time as a helicopter pilot in Vietnam.
Where the young Vietnamese boys started climbing into his helicopter.
And he was terrified they were planting explosives. He got aggressive, he pulled out his pistol, and was ready to shoot one of them.
And then he heard his mother's voice.
He heard her voice in his head pleading, I did not give you life to take another mother's child. It was this visceral shock that forced him to confront this angry, aggressive part of himself. He realized that for him to become the new person, the teacher, the success, that old identity had to die.
That kind of internal transformation is so powerful, and it leads into chapter 16 about education and discipline. Kiyosaki admits he was a terrible student in high school.
Flunked English twice, was a C student, but military school at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy gave him the discipline he lacked. He says if he'd gone to a normal university, he probably would have dropped out to go surfing.
And Trump, at Wharton, was a serious student, but his real advantage came from doing more than what was required.
He was in class, but in his spare time, he was studying foreclosures, getting that streetwise knowledge. His belief is, if you do only what you need to do to get by, then get by you will. You have to always do more.
Chapter 17 applies those military lessons directly to being an entrepreneur.
Kiyosaki realized that the real risk in combat wasn't the combat itself. It was being unprepared. He changed his thinking from combat is not risky to being unprepared is risky.
And he carried that right into business. Entrepreneurship isn't risky. Being financially and intellectually unprepared is what's risky.
Right, and he learned to diminish himself in negotiations, to use strategic control instead of just brute force. All those lessons prepared him for the world of business.
And then they use these great analogies from sports. Kiyosaki and his high school football coach.
Yeah, his coach, a former NFL player, told him that even though he was faster and more talented than the starter, he lacked heart.
And that was devastating for him.
It was. It forced him to completely redefine what commitment meant. He realized he was talented but complacent. He started practicing with this intense, disciplined focus.
Which led to his diagram. Thoughts lead to actions, which lead to results.
If you want to change your results, you have to start by changing your thoughts and your attitude. It's all about focus. Follow one course until successful.
They both use golf as a mirror for a person's character. How you play reveals who you are under pressure.
Trump is described as playing golf the same way he does business. Long, straight, accurate, precise. He focuses on instinct, like Wayne Gretzky skating to where the puck is going to be.
But even with all that preparation, failure happens. Kiyosaki's big failure was his surfer wallet business. He lost nearly $1 million.
And that was the critical turning point. It was the pain of losing everything that made him finally become a dedicated student of his rich dad's teachings. He realized the problem wasn't the business failing. It was his own financial intelligence that had failed.
It was his wake-up call.
The ultimate wake-up call.
Right.
And finally, in Chapter 20, they tie all of this back to ethics and purpose. Kiyosaki talks about being confused by religious messages that money is evil.
And his rich dad gave him that simple explanation about the difference between God and gold.
Just the letter L. To have the Midas touch, you have to get rid of the 4 L's. Loser, looter, lousy leader, and liar.
It's an ethical framework for wealth.
It is. And he stresses the golden rule. And that love is the key to enduring the pain and frustration that comes with work and investing.
And Trump's philosophy is similar. He believes prosperity shouldn't be shunned, and he focuses on responsibility. He keeps a picture of a galaxy nearby to keep his own problems in perspective.
It keeps him both confident and humble. When you put it all together, the shrinking middle class, the need for control, creativity, discipline, they're really prescribing a radical internal transformation.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? You basically have 2 paths you can choose for your financial future: simplicity or complexity.
And there's no right or wrong answer, but you have to choose. Simplicity means downsizing, maybe moving off grid. Complexity, their path, means embracing the global business world, constant learning, constant management.
And for those who choose complexity, Kiyosaki leaves you with specific things to focus on.
First, fundamental investing skills. You have to be able to read the numbers. Second, focus on one niche and become an absolute expert. And third, know the tax laws for the B and I quadrants. That is the single biggest tool for legal wealth creation.
Because the ultimate goal is freedom. And that freedom is found in the B and I quadrants, where you have the most control.
The biggest risk, as we said, is just not moving, not learning. And that leaves us with that final provocative thought from Kiyosaki for you to think about.
What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?
Your answer might reveal some hidden visionary idea, but turning that vision into reality, they stress, requires financial intelligence and the absolute willingness to learn how money really works.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, follow up in the next topic. Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to continue our deep dive into the core philosophy behind why we want you to be rich. 2 men, 1 message.
We've spent a lot of time on the foundational worldview, haven't we? This radical idea of shifting from relying on systems for security to building your own freedom.
Absolutely. And now it feels like we're making a pivot, a big one.
We are. We're moving from the philosophy to the practical execution. Our focus today covers part 4, which is titled, If You Were in My Shoes, What Would You Do? And then part 5, Just Get Started.
So we're moving past the why and getting deep into the how.
Exactly. This is the playbook.
And the mission here, for you listening, is really to get the blueprint for moving beyond just, wanting wealth.
Right.
We're talking about tangible actions, the specific kind of education you need, and maybe most importantly, the huge psychological shifts required for real entrepreneurial freedom.
It's so much more than just financial literacy, isn't it?
Oh, completely. It's framed as a total rejection of that old industrial age security mindset.
And a full embrace of, maximum personal control. That's the goal.
So where do they start? If you're the learner, what's step 1 on this path?
It all begins with accountability, radical personal accountability. And the very first step toward that, laid out in Chapter 21, is about understanding where real wealth education actually comes from.
And how you have to fundamentally change your entire approach to learning.
That's it. It starts with learning how to learn.
Okay, so let's start with that cornerstone idea they present, the mentor-apprentice model. Both authors talk about their rich dads, and for them, this just highlights the irreplaceable power of learning directly from someone who is already winning the game you want to play.
It's a throwback, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the original system for passing on economic knowledge.
Before the big government-controlled school system.
Exactly. Before all that, the apprentice system was how skills, crafts, and crucially, knowledge about creating wealth were handed down. The book argues that this direct, hands-on, contextual mentorship is just fundamentally superior to the generalized academic model we have now.
Kiyosaki makes a really sharp distinction here. He says a college degree, while it's important, is really just a ticket.
A ticket, yeah. A prerequisite.
Right. It gets you in the door. He uses his own example of getting into Navy flight school. The degree showed he could focus, that he had 4 years of diligence.
But it wasn't the education itself.
No. The real education, the practical financial education needed to win the money game, is something totally separate from that initial ticket.
And that's the trap, isn't it? So many people confuse the ticket with the destination.
They think the degree is the education they need for financial success.
Right. And the authors are screaming from the rooftops, saying, if you want to be rich, you have to study wealth creation, not just job preparation.
So what's the first subject on the curriculum then? What do they say you need to study immediately?
The language of business. The financial statements.
And not just one or two.
No, all three. The income statement, the balance sheet, and the statement of cash flow.
And of those three, they put this heavy, almost obsessive emphasis on cash flow. Why that one in particular for someone who wants to be an entrepreneur or an investor?
Because for anyone operating in the B, the business owner, or I, the investor, quadrants, cash flow is the literal lifeblood of everything.
It's the oxygen.
It is. The income statement, it can be manipulated with accounting tricks. The balance sheet can be misleading. But the cash flow statement, that tells the true story of a business's ability to survive and, more importantly, to expand.
Whereas most employees, people in the E quadrant, don't really think about it.
They don't have to. Their income is tied to a salary. Even many small business owners in the S quadrant, they're focused on pricing, not necessarily the flow of cash.
Yeah.
But if you want to be a professional investor or build a real business, understanding cash flow is. It's how you see the real value or the dangerous lack of it in any deal.
Okay, but let's be realistic. The average person listening might not have a rich dad. They don't have easy access to a successful mentor. So how do they replicate that kind of learning?
And the book implies you have to. You have to manufacture it. You do it through sheer dedication and simulated learning.
This is where the cash flow games come in.
This is exactly where they come in. They're not just board games. They're training tools. They're designed to force your brain to engage with financial statements, to identify assets versus liabilities, and to track cash flow, all without risking a single dollar of real money.
So you're building the mental muscle first.
You're training your vision, the vision that the average investor who's just looking at stock price appreciation completely misses.
This need for diligent, deep-level learning, it brings us to the next point they make about this path. It's about raising the bar on yourself.
Massively.
If you want to compete in today's global economy, just doing the average amount of work, it won't just lead to failure. They argue it will make you obsolete.
And the anecdote they use to illustrate this is, it's powerful. It's Donald Trump talking about his son, Eric.
Right. What was the story there?
He talks about one of Eric's professors, who was just blown away by his work ethic. The professor noted that Eric was the only student in all his years of teaching who consistently handed in his papers a week before they were due.
Wow. Not just on time, but early.
Early, always thorough. He'd read the supplementary materials. He just did significantly more than what was required. And the lesson is so simple, but it's radical. Success demands exceptional output.
It's the difference between doing what you need to do to pass a class and doing what's required to actually win in the real world.
Exactly. They're basically telling you, the reader, that you have to increase your stamina, you have to raise your level of diligence if you want to play on a global stage.
Because your competition isn't just the person in the cubicle next to you anymore.
Not even close. Which perfectly sets up the dilemma for the next group they talk about, the adult who doesn't have much money, which they cover in chapter 22.
And these are the people who are really caught in the crossfire, right? Caught between that old industrial labor playbook they were taught
and the brutal new realities of the information age economy.
The book spends a lot of time detailing just how much the rules of money have changed, often, without people even really noticing it was happening.
Oh, it was a slow burn. The WWII generation, they had very simple, very reliable rules. Go to school, get a good job, work hard, save your money.
And retire with a nice, safe pension.
And that entire structure is now, for the most part, dismantled, gone.
And it wasn't a sudden crash. It was a series of legislative and global shifts that just systematically transferred all the risk from the corporations and the government directly onto the individual.
They pinpoint 3 huge shifts. First, the dollar going off the gold standard in '71, which unleashed inflation risk. Second, the ERISA Act of 1974, which basically started the death of secure defined benefit pensions
The DB plans.
in favor of the much riskier defined contribution, or DC plans, like 401ks, where all the risk is on you.
But the real knockout punch for the average white-collar worker, they argue, was a combination of two things in the 90s.
Right. The 1996 Telecom Reform Act and China's entrance into the WTO. This is when the globalization threat got very, very real for the American middle class.
How so? What was the direct connection?
Well, the Telecom Act suddenly made international communication incredibly cheap and efficient. So you combine that with the WTO expansion, and it became easy and very cost-effective for U.S. companies to just export high-skill, white-collar jobs.
We're talking programming, accounting, customer service.
All of it. To places like India or China or Ireland. The competition for that mid-level American job went from being local to global, almost overnight.
And the insight they pull from this is, it's pretty startling. They argue that even asking your boss for a raise is no longer a simple negotiation.
It's a job-threatening move.
Because the company can now find someone overseas to do that same job for a fraction of the cost, all thanks to global telecommunications.
It's the hourglass economy they talk about. The middle is getting squeezed out, and it's forcing a choice. You're either moving toward the rich quadrants or the poor quadrants. The middle ground is vanishing.
So, if you're an adult facing that reality, maybe without a lot of savings, they present two paths forward, and they're extreme.
Very extreme, but also very simple. It's a choice between simplicity or complexity. And this is a life design choice, not just an investment strategy.
Okay, let's break that down. What does the simplicity path look like?
Simplicity means you radically downsize your life. You cut your expenses to the bone, live so far below your means that financial anxiety
It evaporates.
And they give an example of this, don't they?
They do. A couple in Arizona who built their own Adobe home. They live completely off-grid with solar power. They have no mortgage. They've created this totally autonomous existence.
So they've maximized their quality of life by minimizing their financial dependence.
Precisely. And then there's the other path, the complexity route.
Which is the one the authors themselves chose.
Right. And this path demands that you operate a 247 global business. It means constant travel, multiple homes, and being in continuous communication with your team. It is the all-out pursuit of global wealth, and it requires constant vigilance. That choice is fascinating to me. Simplicity or complexity? Because if the whole philosophy is why we want you to be rich, why would they spend so much time detailing a path that seems to reject the pursuit of maximum wealth? What's the hidden message there?
I think the hidden message is about control and quality of life.
Okay.
They recognize that the complexity path, the B&I quadrant path, it requires an extreme level of psychological and time commitment. It's not for everyone.
So if you're not willing or maybe not able to make that kind of Olympic level dedication,
then the simplicity path allows you to maximize your control and minimize your risk in a different way. You achieve a certain level of personal freedom without the constant hustle. The key is that you are choosing your lifestyle. You're in control.
instead of being stuck in that shrinking middle where you have the maximum insecurity and the minimum control.
That's the trap they want you to avoid.
So the underlying philosophy, no matter which path you pick, is to frame your goal as if you're trying to win the money Olympics.
Yes. You have to choose your event. Is your event managing a global real estate portfolio, or is it masterfully managing your household expenses to achieve total independence?
And once you choose,
You dedicate your life to mastering it. You study, you train, you hire a coach if you need to, and you give it everything. Half measures only guarantee mediocrity.
and this choice, this urgency, is especially critical for the next group they address.
The baby boomers, chapter 23.
They represent the last generation that was really raised on that industrial age playbook.
But they're the first to have to retire fully into this new information age economy. And that has created a massive wealth divide within their own generation.
You can see it so clearly. The boomers who successfully made that transition, the ones who worked for or invested in companies like Microsoft or Apple, they're generally doing very well.
But then you have the ones who are tied to those older industrial age sectors.
Like the auto industry or the airlines.
Right. And they're often suffering financially as they get closer to retirement because they were the direct victims of that globalization we just talked about.
For a lot of them, the default retirement plan seems to have become, I'll just keep working forever.
And the book points out the critical, tragic flaw in that plan. Your body has limits. Physical reality will eventually intervene. And the financial reality of long-term care it's staggering.
A nursing home can wipe out decades of savings in an instant.
And those defined benefit pensions their parents had are gone. The 401ks are often not enough. They paint a pretty scary picture of what could happen when the entire boomer generation tries to liquidate their assets at the same time.
That pressure makes the psychological part of this even more important. You have to get away from making decisions based on fear.
Which is why Kiyosaki shares that very personal story in this chapter about needing to lose 50 pounds. It's a powerful metaphor for how you conquer the pain that comes with any major life change, whether it's physical or financial.
It's that classic shift, isn't it? From being motivated by external fear to being driven by internal love.
Absolutely. Kiyosaki admits he'd been lying to himself for 25 years about getting back to his fighting weight. He just kept putting it off.
So what was the trigger that finally made him change?
It wasn't the abstract fear of dying from bad health. He says what finally shocked him into action was the intense, immediate fear of losing precious time with his wife, Kim.
So the motivation became positive. It became about gaining something or preserving something he loved.
Exactly. The source argues that love is the spiritual key to health, wealth, and happiness. It's a much more powerful and sustainable fuel than fear.
And that's a model for how you handle the frustration and the pain that's going to come with trying to restructure your finances or dealing with investment setbacks. That deep internal motivation is what gives you the will to endure.
Without that deep spirit, as his old football coach used to call it, talent by itself is never enough. And to help with the perspective during those setbacks, Donald Trump offers what he calls the blip versus catastrophe theory.
What's the idea there?
The idea is that since boomers have already survived 60 years of life, 60 years of economic ups and downs, they've accumulated a ton of wisdom and experience.
So they shouldn't panic at the first sign of trouble.
Right. A difficult time should be framed as a temporary blip, not a total catastrophe. You have the perspective to know that things cycle.
He gives that encouraging example of a couple whose vacation gets derailed and they end up finding a whole new life running an inn because the owners had an emergency.
It's about being willing to see the opportunity hidden inside the setback. You have to use your accumulated life experience as an advantage, not a burden.
And that wisdom should lead you to be more diligent, to focus on solutions instead of dwelling on the past.
And maybe, to question the whole idea of retirement itself. As Donald's father used to say, to retire is to expire. Staying active and engaged is often the key to a long, happy life.
Okay, so if you've got the mindset right, you've got the diligence. What's the next essential ingredient for success? Chapter 25 talks about creating the right environment for your genius to flourish.
This analogy is so simple, but so profound. A gardener knows a plant needs a specific kind of soil, the right amount of water, the right temperature to thrive.
And people are exactly the same.
Exactly. If your environment is toxic to financial growth, if everyone around you encourages dependence or views success as a bad thing, your own financial genius is going to stay stunted. It can't grow.
Kiyosaki talks about his own childhood environment. He says it was filled with love, but it was financially poor. The very desire for wealth was taboo.
Right. The rich were seen as evil or greedy. So that psychological soil was just not fertile for becoming rich. Even his early job at Xerox, which was a huge success, was still an environment designed to make the shareholders rich, not the employees.
So the environment has to be supportive of those B&I quadrant goals.
That's the core distinction. He says at the Rich Dad Company, they deliberately engineer a supportive environment. Their meetings were about how the staff can become personally richer. They encourage them to start their own businesses, to invest.
They understand that success is almost never a solo act. You need a circle of people who are going to challenge you and support you on that journey.
But what about the millions of people who aren't in that ideal environment? Their job or their home life just isn't supportive. Donald Trump addresses this head on.
And his advice is basically to double down on your focus.
It's intensely practical. He says if your environment isn't conducive to success, you have to put in extra, almost superhuman effort to keep your focus intact.
You have to build your own internal environment.
Yes. Refuse to dwell on the negatives of your situation and focus like a laser on the solutions, on the opportunities, on the small daily steps you need to take. He really emphasizes that success isn't some territory that belongs to an elite few. It's a mindset that anyone can cultivate if they're willing to do the work.
This theme of taking proactive, intentional control, it leads perfectly into Chapter 28, doesn't it? The freedom of business ownership, which is all about the B&I quadrants.
It's the whole point. The insecurity that most people feel about their jobs, their salaries, their retirement,
Yep.
it all stems from one thing: a lack of control.
You're relying on external forces, your boss, the stock market, politicians.
Exactly. Maximum freedom, they argue, only exists in the B, business owner and I, investor, quadrants. Because in those quadrants, you control the asset, you control the systems, you control the leverage.
And they stress that the ultimate difference between the people in the different quadrants isn't their intelligence or even their income. It's their values.
That's a huge point. Kiyosaki's poor dad, in the E quadrant, his core value was job security, stability, retiring safely.
Whereas his rich dad in the B and I quadrants, his core value was freedom, continuous learning, building systems.
And Kiyosaki talks about how when he first started moving into the B and I quadrants, he felt like he was betraying his poor dad's values. It shows you how deep that psychological conflict can run when you try to change quadrants.
So to succeed as a business owner, you have to embrace a different set of values. You have to love to learn, and you have to see instability as a learning opportunity.
Yes, and the key to maintaining control in that instability is education. The more financially educated you become, the faster you can spot good situations and get out of bad ones before they become, catastrophes. You replace anxiety with discernment.
Now, while Kiyosaki is very bullish on the B and I quadrants, Trump's contribution here is a really important reality check. He offers a strong word of caution.
A very strong word. He does not recommend entrepreneurship to everyone.
That feels like a critical piece of realism in the book.
It is. Trump tells a story about advising a man in his 60s to start a business, and then realizing later that that advice could have been devastating. For someone who doesn't have the psychological hardiness, it could cause them to lose everything at that late stage of life.
So it's not a gentle path.
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
It demands extreme drive, passion, tenacity, and the ability to handle colossal amounts of stress and failure.
So why would anyone endure that? If you do succeed, what's the ultimate reward?
The reward, they say, is an immense integrity of purpose.
What do they mean by that?
It's that feeling that the buck starts and stops with you, the owner. They compare it to the feeling of growing a tree. It's a living thing, an expression of your deepest purpose that you have to nurture through seasons of growth and storms.
So it's self-expression at the highest level.
That's it. And that's why the B and I quadrants provide not just the big financial rewards like favorable tax treatment and leverage, but also this deep psychological satisfaction of contributing. You're creating jobs, you're investing capital. You become part of the solution, not someone dependent on others.
All right, so moving from the philosophy of control to the actual application of capital, let's look at the specific investment vehicles the authors like, starting with chapter 26 on the stability of real estate.
Real estate is overwhelmingly their favorite asset class.
Mm.
And the main reason comes down to a concept they call obsolescence avoidance.
Obsolescence avoidance, meaning it doesn't go out of style.
Right. Unlike so many companies today, even blue chip companies, think about a giant like GM fading, or the potential future threats to a Google or a Dell. Things change fast.
Especially in the information age. They say that modern intangible assets, like a company's brand or its software, can be disrupted almost overnight by kids with different minds.
Exactly. Corporate longevity just isn't a guarantee anymore. But land. Land is fundamentally finite. It's durable.
Yeah.
It takes an extremely long time for a well-located piece of property to become obsolete.
This links back to history, too. They talk about the very term real estate.
Yeah, that translates from the Spanish real to royal estate. And the concept still holds. We pay property tax to the government, right? Well, if you stop paying that tax, you find out very quickly who the true royal owner of the land is. It reinforces this enduring power structure that has always existed around land ownership.
So professional investors are not just looking for appreciation for the price to go up. They're focused on finding intrinsic value and then leveraging the tax code.
Which brings us to a huge technical concept for B&I quadrant investors.
Yeah.
Depreciation.
This is vital, and it's something most people in the E&S quadrants just don't understand.
Not at all. Professional real estate investors live and breathe by depreciation. It's a non-cash accounting expense. It's a phantom expense. The tax code lets you deduct the supposed decline in the value of the building structure, not the land, just the building over time.
Okay, so it's a phantom expense. How does that actually benefit the investor in real terms?
It creates what they call a phantom cash flow item. So let's say your property generates $10,000 in positive cash flow for the year, real money in your pocket. But the accounting rules let you claim, say, $12,000 in depreciation for that same year. That $12,000 deduction completely shields your $10,000 of real cash flow from taxes.
So you get tax-free income.
You get tax-free income. The value isn't just in the cash flow itself, but in the tax mechanism that protects that cash flow. It's a massive advantage that people earning a salary in the E quadrant simply don't have access to.
And this requires that specialized knowledge, that vision they keep talking about, the ability to see with your brain what your eyes can't.
That's what the cash flow games are designed to train. Your brain starts to see the depreciation opportunity or the undervalued property, where the average person just sees a high price tag or risk.
Trump adds to this by saying he just has a passion for tangible assets because they rarely become obsolete. He uses the example of Manhattan.
Right, the original price was what, around $24? It's only gotten more valuable. His own success, like Trump Tower, shows that tangible assets, when you combine them with creativity and capital and control, can provide enormous predictable rewards over decades.
Okay, now let's shift gears to a very different kind of business model they discuss in Chapter 27, network marketing. This is one that capitalizes more on social capital.
And they immediately address the big question everyone asks, isn't it just a pyramid scheme?
The elephant in the room.
It is. And Kiyosaki's counter-argument is based on structure. He says, look, all large corporations are pyramids. You have one CEO at the top and everyone else down below.
So he presents network marketing as a viable income source, but you have to evaluate it based on 5 specific factors.
Yes, you have to look at the compensation system, the location and structure, the quality of the training, its expandability, and the predictability of the income.
The critical thing here, though, seems to be that the whole model relies on the individual becoming their own marketing and sales department.
You're removing the middleman, the advertising agency, and you're taking on that role yourself.
Which is why Donald Trump really stresses that this business is not for everyone.
Not at all. He says it requires extreme self-motivation and a highly sociable, outgoing personality. If you're not a people person, it's probably not the right fit.
So the core value isn't just the product you're selling.
Often, the real value is the high-quality personal development and sales training that the system itself provides. The authors see the business structure and the education it offers as the real asset. It's a system that can build B quadrant skills.
And the accountability is incredibly high.
Which is part of the control mechanism. You are legally responsible for the claims you make about the product, about the company. So success depends on diligence, genuine enthusiasm, and finding the right product at the right time.
If you're truly passionate about what you're selling, that genuine, controlled enthusiasm is hard to compete with.
It forces you into a high-effort, high-control activity that demands you constantly develop your skills. It's another challenging battlefield, and they just demand that you choose it wisely and go all in if you do.
So all of these lessons, the education, the control, the environment, the investments, it all seems to build up to the final major point in Chapter 29.
The capstone, really.
The powerful idea that leaders are teachers.
Yes. Given the monumental financial challenges we're facing, government debt, the shrinking middle class, they argue that the world needs more leaders, not more followers, just hoping the government will solve their problems.
They want to break that entitlement mentality.
And they offer 3 core definitions of what a leader is. The first is that leaders are role models.
They live by a higher standard.
They do. They're constantly striving to expand their own means, to expand their contributions. Kiyosaki says explicitly that seeing Donald Trump's expansive lifestyle inspired him to keep raising his own bar, to stop listening to his poor dad's advice to just live below his means.
The second definition is maybe the most psychological. It's that true leaders are the ones who transcend fear.
Kiyosaki's military training really comes through here. He says fear is the great divider. It's what separates leaders from cowards, success from failure.
And he talks about that critical cognitive shift he had to make in Vietnam.
Right. He had to transform his thought process from the passive, fear-based thought, combat is risky, to the proactive, control-based thought, being unprepared is risky.
That is a fundamental shift in perspective.
It's everything. And it requires what the book calls ego suicide.
That's a strong term.
It is. The idea is that for the new, wealthy, healthy entrepreneur to be born, the old identity has to die. The poor person, the dependent employee, the lazy person, that part of you has to go.
And the pain of letting go of that old, secure identity, even if it was limiting you, is the biggest psychological hurdle.
It stops most people from ever growing. Leaders are the ones who are willing to endure that internal death to reach a higher purpose. That's the real barrier to entry for the B and I quadrants.
So you have to stop identifying with the values of job security and embrace the values of freedom and control.
And that leads to the third definition of a leader. Leaders have vision and they teach others to see.
They can predict the inevitable.
Exactly. Trump can look at a rundown building or a blighted area and see a golden skyscraper and future value where everyone else just sees decay. He sees what others can't because his mind is trained to see future possibilities.
And that vision allows them to move forward with creativity and discernment to replace fear with insight.
It's the ultimate payoff of all the financial education they've been advocating for this entire time.
So all these lessons, education, control, vision, it all brings us right to the conclusion of the book, the necessity of commitment and focus.
And they use a simple formula, one learned from sports and applied to finance. Thoughts lead to actions, which lead to results.
So if you don't like your current results, you can't just change your actions. You have to go all the way back to the beginning and redefine your thoughts.
That's where your commitment comes from, and your commitment is what will dictate your actions. They say the biggest risk isn't losing money on a bad investment.
What is it then?
The biggest risk is not moving forward with the knowledge you've gained. It's learning all this and then doing nothing.
Yeah.
If you choose to become rich, you have to commit to educating yourself and commit to succeeding, not just trying.
And to help with that commitment, they suggest a kind of personal audit, a rigorous self-evaluation.
Yeah, you have to be brutally honest with yourself. Look at how you're actually spending your time and your money. You have 168 hours in a week. Are you carving out 4 to 10 of those hours specifically for your financial education?
And crucially, is your environment, your friends, your family, are they truly supportive of this commitment?
And they emphasize that the only person who can answer those questions and the only one who can implement the changes is you.
The book can give you the insights, but the responsibility is ultimately yours. They want you to let go of that entitlement mentality and get rich so you can solve your own problems.
Instead of becoming a burden on the systems.
Which brings us right back to the title of the book, doesn't it? Why do they want you to be rich? It's not just about accumulation.
It's about contribution. The wealth is a tool. It's a means to an end, a platform for doing good in the world.
Which is why they bring in that Churchill quote. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give.
That's the highest measure of success. Once you achieve that financial freedom, you're in a position to give generously. You become part of the solution to the world's problems, instead of being one of the dependents. The ultimate goal of financial education is the ability to lift others up.
The path clearly demands focus, continuous learning, that due diligence on a daily basis, and a lot of patience.
A lot of patience. Realizing that true wealth takes time, it takes focused effort, and it takes disciplined thought. If you commit to thinking bigger, you have to commit to keep learning, keep growing, and just keep moving forward.
That's a really powerful and proactive thought to leave everyone with. The idea that the freedom and control you build in the B&I quadrants, it should ultimately be leveraged for the maximum positive contribution you can make. It's about becoming a leader and a teacher in your own right.
That's the final message.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, follow up in next video. We look forward to seeing your success story.